Well, a guided submarine from the United States is entering the Persian Gulf today in the latest show of force to Iran. The USS Georgia is loaded up with 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. This comes a day after military officials say Iran-backed militia and Iran-backed militia fired 8 rockets at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reporting the rocket didn't injure anyone at the embassy, but the blast did damage residential structures in the surrounding green zone. But this latest show of force by the U.S. military is to send Iran a strong message. The aircraft carrier Nimitz is still nearby at a station just outside the Persian Gulf in the Arabian Sea. Joining me now to discuss the growing threat from Iran is the former Chief of Staff for the National Security Council, former CIA analyst and CEO of the Center for Security Policy. Fred Fleitz is with us. Fred, great to have you back on the show.
Good to be here.
So they really aiming at the United States Embassy? You got to be nuts. But then again, I know the leaders of Iran are nuts, Fred.
Unfortunately, this happens from time to time. It sort of slipped off in the spring because President Trump promised overwhelming retaliation. What the Iranians are doing now through their Shiite militias in Iraq, they're thinking that this violence will force President Trump to close our embassy in Baghdad and withdraw all troops. The president is substantially reducing U.S. troops in Iraq, but he's leaving some behind because we don't want to give the country to Iran. We don't want to close our embassy. Prime Minister Kadhimi is doing good work trying to resist Iran and the radical Islamists in the country and their Shiite militias. And Iran basically thinks it can push President Trump around right now and force his hand. They're not going to succeed.
Now, to me, Fred, that seems like an idiotic move on Iran's part. The president's not going to budge here. Now, if they took the assessment that, okay, in a month or two, if Joe Biden makes it to the White House, that's a guy they probably could push around and might scare him out of Baghdad.
Well, I don't think Joe Biden's going to make any decisive decisions. I mean, the president could decide to close the embassy and pull all troops out of Iraq because Donald Trump is a decisive president. I don't think Joe Biden is capable of a decisive decision. I think he's simply going to keep our presence in Iraq. Maybe he's going to send more troops in, but I don't see Biden withdrawing.
All right. So then Iran, this is their last-ditch effort. They do know that once Biden does get in, I've got to believe the nuclear deal all comes back together for them, just like it did under Obama. Do you think?
Yeah, I'm afraid that's probably the case. The Biden team is saying that, well, we'll rejoin the deal when Iran's in full compliance. Now they're saying, well, we'll rejoin the deal thinking Iran can comply down the road. But Iran will not rejoin the deal until we drop the billions of dollars in sanctions placed on Iran by President Trump. And if the U.S. does that, it's going to be a huge windfall Iran will spend on terrorism, its missile and nuclear programs, meddling in the region. We saw this happen in 2016 after the nuclear deal was fully implemented. My hope is that Biden is going to rethink that because Iran is so much more dangerous now than when he was vice president. But I'm very worried about what Biden's going to do.
Yeah, it will be an absolute disaster if we get to that point. Fred Fleitz, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. That region often gets forgotten about as we deal with so much going on in the United States, but it's important we talk about it because it's our national security that certainly is at risk. Fred Fleitz, again, I appreciate you coming on the program.
Good to be here.
All right.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV because we're real news for real people.